Okay, so as people join, I just want to welcome everybody. We're so excited that you're here today and that you're joining us to honor GIST Awareness Day. We hope that you've been active in sharing facts and stories about GIST today throughout social media, and also hope that you'll be active in this way throughout the year. So it's our mission to support GIST patients and caregivers in every way that we can, and awareness is just one way that we can make sure that everyone has heard about this rare disease. And we have many resources available, and you can see the links that have been shared in the chat window. If you want to check those out, that'd be great. So before I introduce our presenters, I want to encourage you to type questions in the chat. We're going to save the questions to after the presentations. We also can allow you to unmute yourself at the end of the presentations if you want to personally just ask them verbally. So just make note of that for the schedule. So it's my great pleasure to introduce our first presenter today, GIST expert Dr. John Glod, who joins us from the NIH. Dr. Glod currently serves as the clinical director of the Pediatric Oncology Branch in the Center for Cancer Research at the National Cancer Institute. His research interests are focused on early-stage clinical trials for pediatric patients and rare pediatric solid tumors, including multiple endocrine neoplasia-related medullary thyroid cancer, SDH-deficient GIST, and tumors of the central nervous system. Dr. Glod will be sharing treatment updates for SDH patients today and updates from the NIH clinic. And we're so excited for him to be here today. Welcome, Dr. Glod. You can begin your presentation.
Sarah, thank you so much. It's really my great pleasure to be here and an honor to talk today and to participate in GIST Awareness Day. So I'm going to try to sort of briefly give you guys a flavor of the NIH intramural program and let you know a little bit about what's going on here at the NIH. And really, I think, I think most of the SDH deficient GIST research and progress is a sort of a big collaboration, both in the NIH and with lots of other people. And hopefully I can try to give you a sort of a flavor of that as well. A few things about the National Institutes of Health. The intramural program is in Bethesda, Maryland. It's a big campus. It looks like a big college campus, but one big building is the hospital building. All the patients that come to the NIH are on a clinical trial, so it's a strictly research hospital. There's a few things that are unique about the National Institutes of Health. Patients that come to the NIH are not charged. We don't bill for anything, so we can see patients without that being a concern. And we have many doctors with different expertise, and I'll talk about some of those. So we're always happy to hear from anyone. We're always happy to talk to patients about not just the NIH, but trials that are available in other places and how they can sort of best navigate having a rare disease, which can be quite tricky. So please don't hesitate to reach out to us. Whether you're interested in coming to the NIH or whether you just want to talk with someone and get some ideas about what the next steps for you or your family member might be. So I take care of mostly patients with really rare tumors, and really in pediatric oncology, they're all rare tumors. And there's a lot of things that are challenging about getting better at taking care of people with rare tumors that are different than some of the more common tumors. And some of the experiences, some of the things I talk about, you may have experienced during your sort of journey. And one of the things with SDH deficient GIST, so all GIST is not that common of a cancer, and SDH deficient GIST is rare even in the landscape of GIST totally. And so making sure that people get to the right diagnosis, that people get to talk with experts who understand the disease and have taken care of other patients with SDH deficient GIST is important. And I think that's one of kind of the goals of the LifeRap group and us at the NIH in thinking about SDH deficient GIST and other rare tumors. Can we make sure that primary oncologists throughout the US know about the disease, understand a little bit about the disease, and at least know where they can call to get advice or resources in taking care of patients. So we've done a few things in collaboration with lots of other people throughout the country to try to improve this and make this better. And I think LifeRaft has done a outstanding job in educating patients and doctors about the disease. The second question is always a tricky one with rare diseases. Can we really understand what is the pathogenesis? Why do people get SDH-deficient GIST? Why does this tumor form? And rare diseases are always very challenging. They're challenging in that it's hard to develop preclinical models. Dr. Siklik just published a great article. I think it was less than a year ago now. Time really flies. That looked at a preclinical model of GIST, and us and other groups are working on developing more preclinical models of GIST so we can understand how the tumor forms, and in that way develop therapies that are rational and hopefully effective. The third sort of big challenge with rare tumors is it's much easier to run a clinical trial for a tumor that is more common, that many patients have. You can design a trial that can see small differences in outcome because there's lots of people that have the disease. When it's a rare tumor, it's tricky to get enough patients to understand what the trial means. And in my opinion, what we try to do when we're making a clinical trial for a rare disease like SDH-deficient GIST is sort of wring every bit of information out of that trial as possible so we can make the next trial, the next idea better. This is, if you look at all of the early phase clinical trials, phase 2 trials, most of them for any disease don't work. So the idea is to make sure that even if they don't work, you understand the disease better and you can make the next trial better. And I think that's especially important in really rare diseases. And I think the last thing that the NIH tries to do, and we've tried to do, is really understand how people with SDH-deficient GIST do over time. What are the challenges they have? What can they expect over the long term? What's the prognosis? And I'll talk a little bit more about what we've done at the NIH to try to facilitate that. So the goals, what are we really trying to do? Help local providers and help help patients get the correct diagnosis to start with. So that's a really important.
Dr. Glod, we're not seeing the slides advance, so I didn't know.
Oops. Yep, they should advance. Let me see if I could. How about if I do it this way? I won't put it in the slideshow mode here. Let me. Give me 1 second. Sorry.
Sure, no problem. In the meantime, if people want to type in questions for later on, you can type in the chat box, and we can have that saved for later on after the presentations.
What do you guys see anything now?
Now we're starting to. We see like your desktop with the PowerPoint up. So if you can enlarge it.
It's my whole desktop. Let me see if I can try it a little better here. How about this? Can you see the PowerPoint now?
Yes.
So I won't put it in
Oh, there you go.
Presentation mode. All right. Here we go.
All these lovely pictures. Hopefully.
Got it. All right. You see Dr. Lleyton up there in the corner?
Yeah, sure, of course.
All right.
Great.
So one of the critical things is getting the right diagnosis, and we collaborate with a pathologist here, Dr. Lleyton. There's a number of pathologists throughout the country who have expertise in diagnosing SDH-deficient GIST, and we are happy to. You can submit samples to the pathology department here directly for just a second opinion on the pathology, or if you let me know or let BJ know, we're happy to help do that. So that's a really important feature that I think the NIH can help with. We can also, I think, help to identify trials and resources outside the NIH. So if you talk with some doctors that are not in the NIH, one of the advantages I have here is I don't see 40 patients in an afternoon in clinic. I only take care of patients who are in clinical trials. So if you send me an email or send BJ an email and you live somewhere else in the country, I can let you know, or we can let you know what trials are available, not just here, but anywhere, and what doctors are available who have experience with SDH deficient GIST. And Sarah, I'm sure, can also do that, but don't hesitate to reach out if there's some way we can be of help with that. And then another way I think that's been really great for us, I really enjoyed, is the NIH Pediatric and Wildtype GIST Clinic. And this was started, let's see, how many years ago is it now? It's more than 10 years ago. Dr. Hellman initiated. There's Dr. Hellman there. I don't know if you could see, he's kind of in the back with the mustache in the middle on the group picture there. And so that was to try to bring together people with an interest in wild type GIST. And at that point, people didn't know that it was SDH deficient GIST. It was just GIST that didn't have a KIT or a PDGFR alpha mutation. And I think this has been a great mechanism to have patients meet each other, to have experts from different areas of the country get together and really talk things out. And I think a lot of sort of progress has emanated just from that sort of collaborative atmosphere. And I'll talk about that a little bit later as well. We're going to have a combined virtual and in-person GIST clinic this year. It's way more fun if it's everyone in person, but unfortunately we're not able to do that this year. But at least we'll have a GIST clinic with some of the patients in person with the physicians here, and that will be in September. And the outside physicians will join in virtually. So I'm hoping next year we'll be back to all together. It's a lot more fun. I think we're full for the GIST clinic this year. I'm not sure, but BJ Thomas is an outstanding research nurse. She's in charge of the NCI Pediatric and Wildtype GIST clinic, and there is the email for the clinic down there. And BJ is great. If you have questions, she can help you with it. I wanted to talk just really briefly. There's, when I started here at the NIH about 10 years ago, and at that point there was almost no SDH deficient GIST basic research going on. And now we sort of have a bunch of people that are interested in SDH deficient GIST and a bunch of basic science research going on. I'll just touch on that. So many of you heard of Paul Meltzer. Paul's lab identified SDHC epimutant. So the methylation of the SDHC promoter that leads to the epimutant GIST, and his lab continues to be very interested in that. We have Dr. Shern and Dr. Sunby, who are experts not just in SDH deficient GIST, but in other tumors, and they are looking at circulating biomarkers. So they would look at circulating tumor DNA, and the idea there is to try to see if we can understand or identify markers in the blood that will let us know when a GIST might be developing in someone who has a germline deficit. So that could be really useful. Shri Nair and Dr. Taylor are working on metabolism of SDH deficient GIST. The mutation is in the pathway of glucose metabolism, and can we understand that both as a potential way of using perturbations in the metabolites that are seen in the blood as a way of identifying tumors, and also can we sort of leverage changes in the metabolism as a target for treating GIST. Many of you know Dr. Blakely. So Dr. Blakely is a fantastic surgeon who's been at the NIH now for a couple of years. I'll talk about his trial later. But in addition to his clinical work, he and Dr. Hernandez have developed a in vitro model where you can keep little tiny pieces of tumor viable for some time outside the body. And this has been a great resource in trying to look at the biology of GIST and other tumors and potentially test therapies. And then we've been working on a mouse model of GIST. Again, the preclinical models for SDH deficient GIST have been really tough. And Dr. Tomasoni and Dr. Tesarolo are mainly involved in that. And hopefully we'll be able to, at some point, present to you a model that looks really promising. The most recent trial that we completed here at the NIH for SDH deficient GIST was for a drug called guadocytabine, and that is a drug that decreases DNA methylation. So the hypothesis behind this trial is that people with SDH deficiency have increased methylation across all of the genes within the GIST tumor. And if we could decrease that methylation, would we change the expression of genes and allow tumors to be treated? And unfortunately, that trial did not cause any of the tumors to get smaller. We did have a number of patients who were on the drug for an extended period of time, but it didn't change any of the sizes of the tumors. And this trial included almost all people with GIST, and there were 9 patients. This is their age. almost all of them had GIST of one kind or the other, but we also included other tumors that were biologically similar to SDH deficient GIST. So people with SDH deficiency, as I'm sure many of you know, can also get tumors called paragangliomas. So if a person had SDH deficiency and a paraganglioma, they could be on the trial. And we also included people with a disease called HLRC, hereditary leiomyosarcoma and renal cell cancer. And these patients get different kind of cancers. They get renal cell cancer predominantly, and they have a mutation in another gene that's right next to succinate dehydrogenase in that glucose metabolism called fumarate hydratase. So anyway, this trial did not show a response, but I feel like we've made some inroads in how we can look at people with SDH deficiency. The first is, this is the first trial where we really try to look at the metabolism, the concentration of different metabolites in the blood of people before treatment and then after treatment. And this is just, we've looked at many metabolites. This is just metabolites in the TCA cycle, which is a part of glucose metabolism. And there's a bunch of different chemicals that are in that pathway. And we didn't see any consistent changes in those chemicals before and after the drug. But we did learn how to measure them more accurately. And going forward, I don't know if anybody listening has been to the NIH, but we take a sample. If you're on the protocol, the natural history protocol with me, we'll take a sample of your urine and a sample of your blood. And I think we're getting better at measuring these metabolites and perhaps at understanding what we can use this information for. The other, I think, really important part of this trial, and some other trials with SDH deficient GIST have done this, is from my world, SDH deficient GIST is a tumor that straddles pediatric and young adult patients. So patients as young as 11 or 12 years old, all the way up to adult patients. But classically, clinical trials are only for people 18 and over or 18 and under. And this was a trial where we included patients all the way from 10 all the way up to however old you were going to be. So included both pediatric and adult patients. Adult oncologists were involved in this trial. Dr. Del Rivera was involved in taking care of adult patients on this trial. So I think for diseases that kind of fit in that young adult age group, it's important to have collaboration between adult and pediatric oncologists to be able to run the trial. So that was sort of, I think, an important thing that we learned how to do in this trial. There are two open trials that are specifically for GIST or SDH deficient GIST that are open now at the National Institutes of Health. One is Dr. Blakely's trial, and his is a surgical trial looking at the role of surgery in managing GIST. And his trial includes both patients with SDH deficient GIST, as well as patients with GIST tumors with other molecular drivers, most commonly KIT or PDGFR alpha, but also BRAF and some of the less common drivers. And the goals of his trial are a couple of things. One is to understand how patients do after surgery for metastatic or primary GIST. And so he has a lot of studies where it asks how people are doing, ask about the quality of life. There's a great dietitian that works on his team that helps people that have had a partial or total gastrectomies, and that is a focus of the trial. The other important things from the standpoint of our research and the research together with everyone at NIH is to obtain tissue for developing preclinical models and for research on the biology of GIST. And that tissue can be used by people at the NIH and also people outside the NIH, and to try to characterize the genomics of different types of GIST, and importantly, to try to develop preclinical models. So a preclinical model is if you can get the tumor to grow in a petri dish, or if you get the tumor to grow in a mouse, or if you can get the tumor to grow in Dr. Blakely and Dr. Hernandez's in vitro system that keeps the tumor pieces alive for some period of time. So being able to screen drugs and screen therapies in models prior to putting them in a patient is really important, and has been sort of a hindrance I think in progress in SDH deficient GIST. And this is just a little picture from one of Dr. Hernandez's ex vivo or outside the body in a dish, keeping the tumor pieces alive. And this is just some slides that show that the tumors retain the characteristics of SDH deficient GIST, and that this is staying to show that the tumors stay alive. And the other sort of interesting advantage of this system is parts of the immune system, the immune response against the tumor is still present when you take out a little piece of tumor and put it in the system, and you can just study the body's immune reaction with the tumor. And so for people that are interested in this study or have surgical questions, I know Dr. Blakely talks to lots of patients. There's his email, and the research nurse working on this study is Audra, and both of them are amazing. We also have another study open. The PI of this study is Dr. George at Dana-Farber, but it's a multi-institution study that's run at a few places. And this is a study of regorafenib in patients with sarcoma and SDH-deficient GIST. And the two people running the study here are Dr. O'Sullivan-Coyne and Dr. Chen. And this study is based on preclinical scientific work done in Boston that suggests that inhibition of another one of the signaling mechanisms, FGFR, fibroblast growth factor receptor, is important specifically in SDH deficient GIST. So this, I think, is a really important study, and it's one of several SDH deficient GIST clinical trials now that are going on throughout the country. It's interesting. When I first started, there were none, and now I think there's 4 open, maybe 3. I can't remember, 3 or 4 open GIST trials throughout the country. So that's really great progress. Let's see, I'm trying to take up too much time. I want to say 2 more little things about the my Pediatric and Adult Rare Tumor Network. So this is a large study run at the NIH where we are trying to understand better about rare tumors, and not just SDH deficient GIST, but other rare tumors. And the same sort of challenges people have in making progress in GIST are seen in other rare solid tumors. There are a very small number of patients. Every clinical centers that see them will only see us 1 or 2 patients over the lifetime of a practitioner there, and trying to pool information from lots of different places and lots of different patients to get ideas about, for this study, just how people do with different kind of rare tumors and what sort of treatments people have, physicians and patients have tried. And so this study has been really successful. We're now able to consent patients and enroll them on this study. We love to see patients at the NIH, but they don't have to come to the NIH. Certainly during COVID, we've enrolled patients, we've collected data, and we've talked to them virtually. But we can have patients consent and send records and tissue if they have it, and saliva if testing of their germline DNA is appropriate. And we have a molecular tumor board where we can discuss potential options for those patients, both for trials here at the NIH and other places, and for other medicines that are approved but are not on a clinical trial. And resources in this study can be available for researchers, not just at the NIH, but anywhere. So if there's a particular person who decides in 5 years they're interested in a particular rare disease, we may have samples and some information that can help them. The 2 people that are most involved in this one, Dr. Del Rivero was the initial PI of the study, and now she's concentrating mostly on another kind of cancer. And Dr. Wedekind Malone is the current PI of the trial. We've enrolled a lot of patients with GIST. So this is a little bit of an older figure from, I guess, several months ago. And so you can see the little blue bar here are all GIST patients, and lots of those are SDH deficient GIST. So we tend to sort of concentrate on particular kind of tumors that we have a scientific interest in. So this has been a great resource. I think a lot of people who were at the very early GIST clinics with Dr. Hellman, we've reached out and excuse me, contacted people about being on this study. So you may have heard from BJ on the telephone or on the email. And I think now I just talked to BJ yesterday. Now we have 91. So this was a few months ago. We had 73. Now we have 91 GIST patients. And we're talking with other groups about kind of pooling our data to get the largest population of SDH deficient GIST patients that we can, to really give some updated information on how people do with SDH deficient GIST. And lastly, there's some exciting stuff coming down the line. We're working on a combination trial that includes temozolomide plus another drug with Dr. Siklik, as well as people from a number of other institutions, most of which are people that have participated in the GIST clinic. So hopefully within the next year, that trial will be up and going. And then we started to explore a little bit about different imaging modalities for SDH deficient GIST, trying to use the changes in metabolism as ways of better imaging the GIST, and not necessarily as a way to find the tumor by imaging, but as a way to identify changes that may be prognostic. And two people here working on that are Dr. Choki and Dr. Lindenberg. And so they've been great to work with. And hopefully in the next year or two, we'll be able to bring some of that to bear in patient trials. Thanks very much. I try to cram a ton in kind of a short time. Happy to take questions. And also anytime anyone has questions, you can contact Sarah and she can certainly shunt you over to us if we can be helpful with anything, or feel free to email me directly. So thanks, Sarah. That's it.
Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you for such a compelling and relevant presentation. It's really nice to see how the NIH has really grown with their research over the years and with the multidisciplinary team. So such a nice opportunity today to share that with the community. So once again, everybody's welcome to type in questions in the chat. We can save to the end after our next guest speaks. So with that, I'd like to transition to introduce a very special guest who has had to deal with a GIST diagnosis from a very young age of 12. I've actually got to meet him and his family at the NIH clinic around that time of his diagnosis. So it's really a pleasure to have him today. It's been 7 years living with GIST, and this young man, Lleyton Schelesky, is now an insurance professional who loves music, spending free time outdoors, enjoying nature. And it's a real pleasure to have him speak today. So welcome, Lleyton. You can go ahead and share your story with the community.
Thank you. So for me, my story, I mean, I don't know if it's anything like anybody else's, but it was a pretty normal day. I woke up and went to school, and this was 6th grade for me. And I don't know, probably about halfway through the day, I kind of had a stomach ache. And as most kids going to school at that time, they want to find any reason to potentially get out of half a day of school. And I knew my parents were a little unlikely to want me to go home. So I ended up staying for the whole day. And by the time I got off the school bus, I was barely able to walk and couldn't breathe too well. And thankfully, my dad was working from home that day. He had me lay down for about 15 minutes. And then after that, he actually had to carry me to the car and drive me to the hospital. And I think there was a certain point around then that I realized it wasn't just a normal stomach ache, but I had absolutely no clue what was going on. And once I got to the hospital, I was there for a while, just in the waiting room, and everything just kind of was getting worse as time went by. And eventually they had me in a room where they were trying to have me drink barium so they could do a CT scan to see what was going on. And I was having trouble getting that down just because my stomach was feeling all over the place. And the couple of different times that I got up to go to the bathroom, both times I went, I actually passed out after about 5 to 10 steps. And then I would wake up back in my bed. And when they had me going for a chest x-ray because I wasn't able to drink the barium fast enough, I passed out again too. And after that, the next thing that I remember happening was being airlifted from Troy Beaumont to Royal Oak Beaumont and being surrounded by a bunch of surgeons, and I could see my family down by my feet. And apparently I went through 3 different surgeries through like the next 16 hours or something like that. And I learned that I lost 50% of my blood volume internally. And there's probably about a good 36 hours there that I don't remember right after the surgery. But I do remember my family being there for me, and I had a friend who visited me every day, and I just learned that the other week, actually. I only remember seeing him one time there, and it's definitely not been the easiest journey in the world, but I'm happy that it happened. It's made me who I am, and back then it was a very confusing and scary time, but now I'm starting to learn more about what's going on, and it makes me feel a little bit better about the whole situation. That's about it.
Thank you, Lleyton. It's incredible how vivid that memory is from 7 years ago when you were younger, but you could see how it really stuck with you. It was very pivotal in your life. When you received this diagnosis when you were in middle school, on top of that, it was an emergency surgery that caused you to get this diagnosis. Can you share with us a little bit about that time, more than what you've shared already?
Yeah. I was just very, very confused for a long time during that period. I didn't have quite a concept of exactly what was going on. And, as being a 12-year-old, I kind of assumed, hey, I have cancer. That means I'm going to lose all my hair or something along those lines. And I don't know, it was, I guess, kind of cool for me to learn that not every cancer means you're going to lose your hair or have all these like nasty side effects. And I don't know, I guess the biggest thing for me, honestly, was keeping my hair as a kid. Like,
Well, how did you feel about receiving such a rare diagnosis? I know you were talking about how typically when you hear cancer, it's losing hair, but given that it was so rare, you've never heard about it, how did you talk to your friends about what was going on?
well, I know it was definitely something that was a little difficult for me to explain at first, just because I didn't have the greatest concept of it myself. But eventually I think that the people around you that care about you, I think that there's always a way that you can bring it up to them. And even though they might not understand exactly what you're going through, it's just always helpful to talk about it with the people you know.
Where did you get your strength and determination to get through all that testing and even this anxiety that comes along the way? Where do you get your strength?
I would have to say a lot of it's mental. Having a growth, mentality and having a good outlook on life. Especially when there are things that you can't control. When it's out of your control, you can't be putting all your focus and all your worry into it. I tend to look at cancer as just a piece of me. It's a part of my story, and it's not something that defines my whole life. So that's about it.
I think that that's something similar to what I've heard from other people living with GIST and how they find a way to move on and it being a part of them. What have you learned about being a patient advocate through all this?
Because especially with me being diagnosed so young, back then I didn't exactly have a whole lot of ideas as to, my input or exactly what was even going on. And I mean, I've started to realize, especially the past 2-3 years, how important it is as the patient to have your input be valued and put out there. And I believe it's just very important for the doctors to listen, because ultimately every decision is up to the patient.
Yeah, indeed. And I think that that's, it's pretty fortuitous that we're meeting today on just Awareness Day, given that it's important to talk to your friends about it, ask questions to your doctors. I'm wondering for you, why is just Awareness Day so important?
For me, I think that it's very important because it's not a very common cancer. Most people, if you don't have a family member, aren't dealing with it yourself, you probably haven't heard about it. And I truthfully believe that there should be just as much time and research and money being put into, this cancer as just as all the other cancers.
I agree. And I think it's so great to see how institutions like the NIH and some of the other key opinion leaders out there that are investing in this, and we need to continue to do more because it is underfunded. But yeah, I'd like to transition to, as we just spoke to Dr. Glod, who's one of the experts in this field at the NIH. Lleyton, you attended the clinic back in 2014, so Dr. Glod wasn't there yet, but perhaps you can just share what your experience was like attending the NIH clinic, share some of your memories.
Yeah, so I actually had a really good experience at the clinic, and I think I was there only about a month after the first diagnosis. So, I mean, it was pretty new to me still. And I met someone while I was there actually that helped a lot with going through the process, and her name was Aaliyah. And she kind of was able to help me feel a little bit more normal about what was going on. And it allowed me to feel more comfortable in that environment, because that was all just very new to me, being, poked a little bit and all that. And she was helpful, and just being in the clinic, it was honestly really nice.
And I know that you've also, reconnected with some of the other people from the clinic through Facebook and also from other events where it's not just like a one-time meetup, but it's been really nice for you to kind of follow each other and catch up with each other over time to see how each of you are doing. And I think that can be quite helpful in the journey as well. Would you agree?
Yeah, I would definitely agree.
Yeah. And it's nice because I've been at the clinic as an advocate for so many years, interacting with the experts who attend, but it's something very powerful with the patients and the families. I'm glad it was so positive for you. It's become a very close network of support that we've given one another. And it's not just like a one-time moment. It really, we've seen it's almost like an extended family. People really support each other through the good and the bad over the years. And I've seen how there's this secondary impact that comes from the clinic in terms of how the families have really supported each other over time. So I'm glad your experience was really positive. I'd like to transition to Dr. Glod. You being an expert at the clinic, what has been your experience regarding the value of the clinic for the pediatric patients and for SDH research?
Lleyton, thanks for telling us about your story. That sounds pretty harrowing for a 12-year-old.
Yeah.
So, and I would say almost universally, when I talk to patients and their families about going to the clinic, the thing that people are most impacted by are just meeting other people with the same in the same, not the same, but in at least a similar circumstance, as you said, like, not, if you talk to people, your family, your friends, most people are not have ever going to have heard about a GIST tumor. They don't know what it is. It's different than other kind of cancers, as you said, because you don't get chemotherapy that makes your hair fall out. It's not what people sort of picture in their mind. But certainly the challenges that go along with having a GIST tumor are a lot, but they're not what people have in their head about having a tumor. So I think that is universally the most important thing that people talk about when they go to the clinic: meeting other people, developing relationships with other people in a kind of a similar with similar experiences. I would agree. I mean, I think there's a couple of things that really, I think, I don't think I can speak for all of the kind of expert people that were there, but most, because I'm friends with most of them, I talk to most of them, and I think seeing the patients together, hearing kind of the stories that you just told. I mean, we don't often get to hear a patient's story in that sort of a setting. When the doctor saw you when you first presented, they were not thinking about your story. They were thinking about, oh my goodness, this guy's bleeding, we need to get him into surgery as fast as possible. And you can't get to know a person in that moment. You can't get to know their family in that moment. I think the clinic kind of allows us to kind of get together and get to know patients on a more sort of personal level, which you don't always have the opportunity for. The other thing I think is really great about the clinic that is hard, I think, as a physician to communicate to patients is when there's 10 of us together in a room and we're discussing your case with you there, you will hear where we are unsure, where we disagree, where, you'll hear what we know. And if you go to any of us, you'll hear the stuff we know will all tell you exactly the same. But you'll hear, I hope, and maybe not for you specifically, but in people where the decision is tricky and we don't know precisely exactly what to do, you can, I think, hear that in the discussion. And I think that's important for people to know. I mean, there's some things we know that are the right things to do, and there's some things that are a little bit more our best educated guess, and you can hear how people kind of hash that out and how we discuss it and how we try to get to the best possible advice for a patient. And I think a lot of times that kind of happens behind the scenes. I talk to other doctors about specific cases all the time, but usually it's a couple of us on the telephone and not with the patient right there in the room as we're kind of thinking through things. And I think that's really valuable for people to hear. And I think it's valuable for us to do it in front of a patient, because I think that brings another, that makes you, I don't want to say we don't think about it deeply all the time, but you think about it a little bit differently when you're trying to explain your rationale, not just to your colleagues, but to the patient that is sort of most impacted by what you might decide to do or what you might recommend to do. And also the patients then can in real time kind of give their input. We're going in one direction and the patient doesn't think would be good for them. We kind of hear that in real time. So that kind of collaboration has been also, I thought, really an interesting part of the clinic, a good part of the clinic for me.
Yeah, I'm glad that you brought up those points, because I think it's hard when a family or a patient comes to a doctor, they assume like there's just like one set course, and there is a dialogue that takes place, and the doctor has to listen to like how the patient's quality of life is and how they're tolerating like the medication. And so there's a lot of listening involved in terms of like how the patient's doing and what they're ready for. So I think that when they come and sit at that table with those experts, they really get a whole different perspective of like what's involved in the clinical care process for the patient and the family. And I think also what I've heard over years from patients is like, they're just desperate. Like, what is that magic bullet? Like, what are we doing to like get closer to a cure? So one of the questions that came in from one of the participants was like, what are the greatest needs to help your team in moving SDH research forward?
Yeah, that's a great question. Rare tumors are so tough for many ways. I think there's a couple things that don't guarantee success, but are necessary for success in moving care of patients with rare diseases and rare tumors forward. One is a large international group where there is good collaboration, because you can learn from everybody who sees patients with GIST, and Sarah, if one of us has a case that's a little bit unusual or a little bit different, the discussion will be, you'll be getting kind of an international opinion, because we'll talk to everybody. And even the UK has a great pause GIST clinic, and it is not uncommon for us to email them and say, hey, have you guys seen something like this? What have you done? Has it worked? So just because patients are so rare, that kind of collaboration is critical. And I feel like we have a very nice, very collegial, very friendly, we're a bunch of friends kind of working on things together. I think that's important. I think it's really important for rare tumors, especially, to have things like the Life Raft group, where patients can be engaged in thinking about what is important, what are the decision-making process, and can be invested in the research. I think most of the patients that I see at the NIH, if they give me an opening, I will talk their ear off about what specifically we're trying to do with the different pieces of research. And I feel like that's really important. You guys are donating your pieces of your body and your time and your what's the right word? Kind of it's not really the hardship of coming here and as you said, letting us poke you and prod you and things. And what are we doing with that? And it's not, GIST clinic is not just research. Is not so complicated that I don't think I can explain it to anyone. I think even when you were 12, I could give you some sense of kind of what we're looking at, what we're doing. So I think that's having patients that know about the research, are invested in the research, and are willing to help us and be kind of partners in the research is really important. The other things are kind of mundane. Like, it's only very recently that we meaning everyone in the country and even outside the country have started to develop SDH-deficient GIST that will grow in a petri dish. And even Jason just talked about his model, but that's a tough model. That's still a very hard model to work with, and we still need to do better. Right now, where you can look sort of at scientifically at what we think is going on with SDH-deficient GIST, think about a treatment that might work, and essentially almost try it in a person. There are just not that many ways we can do a lot of experiments in mice or in a petri dish, so that we kind of cone down on things that have a higher chance of success. And that has been a desperate need for a while. I think we're doing a little bit better, but it's still a bit of a hurdle. And I think the last thing is, globally, for rare diseases, we need to work to partner with the pharmaceutical industry in order to get access to potential drugs for rare tumors. And that can always be a bit of a challenge. I think there are many ways that the US government and the European version of the FDA, the EMA, has worked to try to make investigating the utility of drugs where it makes sense in patients with rare tumors, but it's a challenge to get access to the potential drugs, and then it's a challenge to design trials that can give you useful information with a very small number of patients, and to get patients to be able to go on that trial. And it's hard, if there's a trial at 3 places in the US, there's a few people that are close to them. There's a lot of people that have to travel far to go to them, and that's very hard to do. But trying to get design trials and place them so that the most potential people can have access to them has been, will always be a challenge for rare tumors. But I think those are the big ones. Hopefully we're making some inroads.
Yeah, no, very good points that you made. I think that I know people look at their sort of individual situation in terms of what treatment or trial to go on, but when somebody does join a trial, it is contributing to the greater good in terms of learning how this drug is going to be in that population, and hopefully all that learning and knowledge can get us closer to the next step and the next level. I think just as you hinted at the end of your presentation about a combination temozolomide trial, you know, like that single agent moving to combo, like it's all going to lead down the line to something better. So, you know, just to have that perspective. But I think people joining clinical trials, if they have surgery, please, please, please let the LifeRef group know. We can coordinate tissue samples to different investigators, to NIH, so that they can continue to grow them in the Petri dish. And of course, you know, funding helps as well.